They told me she left to find herself, but I remember the slam of the door. The wind was biting that day, even though it was only mid-October. Leaves scraped across the porch like whispers with claws, and the smell of damp pine filtered through the crack in the window. I stood near the threshold of the hallway, just far enough to stay out of her path, but close enough to count the steps she took away from me. Years later, I still hear the click of that lock, and how no one came back for me. My mother didn't pack in a hurry. That was the strange part. She folded each blouse like she was moving into a new life, not running from the current one. Her suitcase clicked open, then shut, then open again. Each time she removed something, then put it back. Her movements were calm, meticulous, almost loving. Just not toward me. Lily sat cross-legged on the bed, holding her ragged pink doll to her chest. The doll's name was Princess Melly. Lily never let me touch it, not even once. It had a bald patch at the top of its plastic scalp and a permanent smudge under one glassy eye, but it was her treasure. She clutched it now like a knight before battle. Mom didn't say much. She rarely did. "You'll stay with Aunt May for a while," she said, without looking at me. For how long, I asked. She zipped the suitcase. "Just until I figure things out." Then she looked at Lily and smiled, actually smiled, and reached out to fix the strap on her overalls. "Canada has better schools," she added. I stared at her, confused. "Why is Lily going with you?" That was when she finally turned her head. Not all the way. Just enough to show she had heard me, but not enough to see me. "Because she's younger," she said flatly. She didn't hug me. She didn't bend down to explain. She didn't cry. She rolled the suitcase over the cracked tile floor, heels clicking like nails on glass. The front door creaked open, flooding the hallway with late afternoon light, and then slam. Silence. I waited for 2 weeks. Aunt May came that night with a casserole and tired eyes. She unpacked her overnight bag and said it was just for a bit. Then she stayed. Eventually, the dishes in the kitchen started to reflect only 2 mouths to feed. The mail no longer had my mom's name on it. Lily's drawings were left on the fridge until the corners curled. But nobody mentioned them. Or her. 2 weeks. That's how long it took for me to stop checking the window. That's how long it took for the sounds in the house to shift. Her perfume no longer clung to the pillows. Her footsteps stopped echoing in the hall. I told myself maybe there had been an emergency. Maybe Canada was just a visit. Maybe she didn't mean to leave me behind. But then I found the doll. Princess Melly was under my bed. Abandoned eyes, wide mouth open in permanent surprise. I picked her up and stared at the faded pink dress, the frayed lace sleeves, the place where Lily had bitten off one of the fingers. And that's when I cried. Not for my mother. Not even for myself. But because that doll had meant everything to Lily. She once screamed for an hour when she thought she'd lost it at the laundromat. She used to whisper secrets to it when she thought I was asleep. It was hers. Always hers. And yet she left it behind. She left me behind. I didn't know what I had done wrong. I didn't know if there was something broken in me that made her choose Lily instead. But I knew one thing: I didn't cry when my mother walked out. I cried when the doll looked at me like I didn't belong. I wrote her every birthday. I never got a single reply. It started the year I turned 13. Aunt May bought me a new notebook with a faux leather cover and gold trim. She said it would be good for journaling. I told her I had something else in mind. That night, I sat in the corner of her narrow kitchen next to the window that fogged up when the kettle boiled, and I wrote my mother a letter. "Hey, dear Mom, I'm doing fine. I got all A's this term. Miss Carpenter said I have a good head for science. Aunt May made her apple pie again for my birthday. It wasn't like yours, but it was still good. I hope you and Lily are happy in Canada. Maybe next year we can celebrate together. Love, Ethan." I folded the letter carefully, slid it into a plain white envelope, and used my best handwriting for the address Aunt May had written on a yellow sticky note 2 years earlier. It was all numbers and foreign abbreviations, Quebec. Something Boulevard Montreal. I didn't even know if they still lived there. But I mailed it anyway. Aunt May didn't ask to see what I'd written. She just gave me a gentle nod and said, "I'm proud of you, honey." I repeated the ritual every year. At 14, at 15, at 16, always on my birthday. I thought maybe it would mean more that way, like the date might stir something in her. Maybe she'd remember the weight of me in her arms or the way I used to draw whales on the wall with her lipstick. I never got a letter back, not even a postcard, not a single reply. But I kept writing. Aunt May kept pretending. Maybe it got lost in the mail. Or she might be busy new country, new language, that's a lot. By the time I was 15, her excuses started to sound more like prayers. Once I overheard her on the phone. She was whispering in the laundry room, back turned to the door. I caught my name. I caught the phrase, "He still thinks she might come back." And then silence. It didn't take a genius to figure it out. She had stopped hoping long before I did. When I was 16, one of the guys from school posted a picture online, some distant cousin, I think. I wasn't tagged in it, but the face was unmistakable. Lily. She was dressed as a princess crown tilted on her curls, standing between two boys in superhero costumes. Her smile was wide, her teeth small and uneven. In the background, I saw a banner that read, "Happy 10th birthday, Lily," and a cake shaped like a unicorn. I stared at that photo for a long time. It wasn't the party that hurt. It wasn't even the cake. It was that there wasn't a single mention of me. Not a card, not a shout-out, not a note. In all the glitter and balloons, I didn't exist. I didn't tell Aunt May. I didn't need to. The following year, on the night before my birthday, I took every letter I'd ever written, 9 of them in total, and carried them out behind the shed. I placed them in a metal tin with a few crumpled newspaper pages and struck a match. The paper curled fast, blackening at the edges like dry leaves. I watched my own handwriting melt into smoke. Sentences that once trembled with hope dissolved into ash. When it was done, I took the cooled tin, filled it with the gray powder, and taped a single label to the lid. For the one who forgot. I left it on the top shelf of the garage behind old boxes and rusted tools. Not as a message to her, but as a gravestone. For the boy who waited too long. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. But something inside me folded. Like a letter that would never be sent again. That was when I began to understand blood doesn't bind people. Not really. And I would never write again. "Hi, Ethan. It's your mom. I need to talk." I froze. The apartment was quiet, save for the low hum of the fridge and the soft ticking of the wall clock. Monday nights were usually calm. I'd just finished loading the dishwasher and Julia was folding laundry in the bedroom. A routine evening until I tapped the voicemail icon and saw the number 4 missed calls, all from a string of digits I didn't recognize. I should have deleted them. I should have let them sit unanswered like a dead thing buried in the dirt. But then I heard her voice. It wasn't exactly how I remembered it. Thinner, maybe. Worn at the edges like fabric that's been through too many winters, but unmistakable. "Hi, Ethan. It's your mom. I need to talk." I didn't move, not even a breath. There was a long pause in the message, the kind that stretches out like a hand that's too afraid to touch. "I know it's been a long time," she continued. "I don't know if you'll even get this. But if you do, please, call me back. It's about Lily." The message ended with a stutter of silence. My thumb hovered over the delete button. Another voicemail started. "Ethan, sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. We're family, okay? And Lily, your sister, she's in a tough spot. Her scholarship might be pulled, and I don't know where else to turn." That voice begging now. Tired. Hollow. "She worked so hard, Ethan. She's got so much potential. But if we can't cover tuition, please, call me. We're still family, right? I didn't know when Julia had come into the room. I only noticed her when she placed a hand on my shoulder. Are you okay? I couldn't look at her. She called, I said. Who? My mother. Julia's eyebrows rose, then lowered into something between concern and disbelief. What did she say? I swallowed. My throat felt tight like I'd swallowed shards of glass. She wants to talk. Says it's about Lily. Something about tuition. Are you going to call her back? The question hung in the air, heavy and bare. I stared at the screen again. 4 missed calls, 2 voicemails, 15 years of silence cracked open in 2 minutes, and 36 seconds of breathy pleading. I could still hear Aunt May's voice in my head from years ago, calm, sharp, certain. She'll come back one day, not out of love, out of need. And here we were. Julia moved to sit beside me. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then gently, "You don't have to do anything you don't want to." I nodded, but my hand was already shaking. Another voicemail notification blinked. A third message. I pressed play. "She's your sister," Rebecca said, almost desperate now. "Whatever happened between us, don't punish her for it. She doesn't even know half the story. You're her brother Ethan. We are still family. We click." It ended mid-sentence. I set the phone down slowly. My palms were damp. My heartbeat was all over the place like it didn't know what rhythm to follow. "She called me Lily's brother," I muttered. Julia tilted her head, not understanding. She said, "You're her brother. Like I'm a ghost. A relic. Something attached to someone else but never my own person." "Ethan," I waited. I said the words suddenly flooding out. I wrote, "I sat by the window every damn birthday, Julia. Every one. I begged for crumbs. I begged to be seen. And now she's back. Not to say sorry, not to make it right, but because tuition is due silence again." Julia didn't interrupt. She knew me well enough to let the storm pass through. The final voicemail pinged. I didn't play it. Instead, I stood, phone still clutched in my hand, and walked to the door. I stared out at the darkened hallway beyond. It was cold outside. Autumn wind pushing dry leaves against the building like whispers trying to claw their way in. I tightened my grip around the phone, knuckles white. My eyes burned. "She called Lily, the baby," I whispered. "Said that baby might not get to stay in school." I paused. My jaw clenched. The baby. My throat went dry. That baby is her daughter. And I'm not. And just like that, 15 years of silence shattered into something sharp enough to bleed. She called again on Thanksgiving. This time, she left a name, Lily. I was standing by the kitchen counter carving into a slightly overcooked turkey breast when my phone buzzed. Julia had her hands full arranging side dishes, humming softly to a playlist of mellow acoustic covers. It was supposed to be a quiet dinner for 2, no guests, no noise, just us, and a few hours of silence after a long, exhausting week. The voicemail alert glowed on the screen. I didn't want to listen. I already knew whose voice would greet me. But curiosity, or maybe something uglier, made me tap play. "Hi, Ethan. I hope you're well. It's me again. I know this is hard. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. But Lily's financial aid package was just suspended. She's trying not to panic, but she's only 19 and she's worked so hard. Please. She's your sister." Click. Just like that, Thanksgiving lost whatever warmth it had managed to build. "She's escalating," I muttered. Julia looked up from the casserole tray. "Was that her again?" I nodded. "She used Lily's name this time." Julia placed the dish down slowly. "She's trying to anchor it, make it harder for you to separate." I didn't answer. I was already scrolling through my inbox, scanning for anything else unusual. And there it was, subject line, "About our son." Not from her directly, from Rebecca Hart to my client, Stella Crane. My blood chilled as I opened the message. Dear Ms. Crane, I hope this email finds you well. I'm reaching out as Ethan's mother. He may not have shared much about our family history, but he's going through a difficult emotional period right now. I'm not blaming him. He's been through a lot. But our family needs support, especially Lily, his younger sister. She's in danger of losing her college funding. I'm only reaching out to ask for understanding in case Ethan seems distracted. Thank you for your patience. Rebecca Hart. I stared at the screen, jaw slack. She's contacting my clients. Julia rushed over. What? I spun the laptop around. She read quickly, her face growing harder with each sentence. She's trying to undermine you professionally, she said flatly. Paint you as emotionally unstable. She's building a narrative, I whispered. I'm the bitter son with unresolved trauma. She's the misunderstood mother just trying to help her daughter. And Lily's the innocent bystander, Julia added, voice thick with disgust. I opened my sent folder, drafted a message, paused. My hands trembled, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something closer to fury, controlled, distilled. I typed slowly. Stella, I appreciate your understanding. Since it's been brought up, I was abandoned at 12 years old. No warning, no goodbye. My mother left with my sister and never came back. 15 years later, she reappears only to ask for money. You can decide who the victim is. Ethan, I hit send. Julia watched me, eyes searching. You okay? No, I admitted, but I'm not helpless. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table long after the dishes were done, scrolling through my old inbox, rereading the birthday letters I'd scanned and emailed to myself years ago. Every line, every hopeful word I'd once written now felt like a bruise pressed too hard. She hadn't just left. She'd rewritten the story, made herself the weary mother of a broken boy, and now she was feeding that lie to the people in my life. People who mattered. I rubbed my temples. I could feel a headache growing, not from stress but from the sheer effort of holding myself together. Then, at 11:47 p.m., a new message popped up. Subject, thank you for responding. It was brief. Ethan, I know you're angry, I deserve that, but I'm coming to town next week. I'd like to see you. Please. Mom. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like a ticking clock. She was coming here. I closed the laptop slowly. My chest felt tight again. The damage she'd done wasn't just emotional anymore. It was social, professional. Now she was shifting from whispers to presence, from emails to reality. I looked up at the wall calendar. Next week, she'd be here. I didn't know what she expected to find, but I knew what I needed to be. Prepared. Because the past had stopped knocking. It was kicking down the damn door. Rebecca will be visiting in person next week. I never thought I'd open the door and see her face again, but there she was. She looked smaller. Not physically, Rebecca Hart had always carried herself like someone born to walk through closed doors. But something about her presence now felt deflated, a little too polished, like a mask stretched tight over regret. She wore a pale gray dress, subtle jewelry, hair pinned back, as if she were going to brunch in a quiet neighborhood, not showing up uninvited at her estranged son's doorstep after 15 years. In one hand, she held a neat paper bag with gold tissue poking out. In the other, a slim clutch. No luggage, no umbrella. Just her and her performance. Julia stood behind me, frozen. The door was only halfway open. My fingers gripped the edge like I needed the wood to keep me upright. Hi, Ethan, she said, soft but rehearsed. I didn't expect you to actually answer. I didn't. I almost didn't. The doorbell had rung once, then again, just enough times to trigger suspicion, not panic. I thought it might be a package. A neighbor. Someone selling something. but instead her. "Can I come in?" she asked, and when I didn't respond, she added, "I just want to talk. That's all." Julia's hand brushed against the small of my back. A silent question. "Do you want me here?" I didn't move. Rebecca's smile wavered. "Look, I know you probably hate me. I would too if I were you. But you're still Lily's brother. And I'm still—" "Don't," I said, my voice flat. "Don't say it." Her mouth closed. The bag in her hand crinkled slightly. "Please," she tried again. "You can yell, you can scream. I deserve it. But let me say something. 15 years is too long for silence." I stared at her, then glanced sideways at the window. Across the street, Brenda from Unit 5B was watering her plants. She had paused, hose dangling, squinting over in our direction. Rebecca noticed too. Her voice lifted just enough. "I only want a minute," she said louder now. "I came to see my son." Is that so wrong? I felt something inside me shift. She wasn't here for a private apology. She was here for an audience. I stepped forward, but not to let her in. I pulled the door just slightly wider and stood fully in the frame. Julia's presence behind me steadied my breathing. "You left," I said calmly. "You made a choice, and I lived with it. But you don't get to show up 15 years later and pretend this is your house." "I don't think that," she said quickly. "I know I've made mistakes." "Mistakes." I cut in, my tone sharpening. "You left me with a stranger. Took my sister. Never called. Never wrote. And now you want something. You want me to save Lily. Or maybe just save your image. I don't know. But I know this." I leaned closer, voice steady, cold. "You lost the right to call yourself a mother 15 years ago. And today, you lose the right to stand at my door." Her eyes flickered. She stepped back, stunned. I saw her jaw tremble. For a second I thought she might cry, but no tears came. Just a sharp exhale, like she'd been slapped. I slammed the door. Julia flinched, then folded into me. She wasn't crying for Rebecca. Her tears soaked into my shirt, quiet and raw. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm not," I said, though my hands were shaking. The silence after that felt deeper than usual. Not peaceful, not calm. Just emptied out. An hour later, I opened the door again to take out the trash. That's when I saw it. A white envelope on the welcome mat, weighted by the smallest stone. I picked it up carefully, already suspecting what it might be. Julia joined me, still barefoot, arms crossed. I opened the flap. Inside, an official-looking letter with a university seal. Attached, a tuition bill. Due date in bold. A sticky note in her handwriting I didn't know who else to turn to. "Please, she's your sister." I stared at it, expressionless. Julia whispered, "She's playing her final card." "No," I said. "This is her opening move. Because this wasn't a cry for help. It was a tactic. And I was done playing defense." Aunt May opened the attic door and said, "I kept everything, Ethan. Even what you wanted to burn." The wooden stairs creaked beneath my feet as I followed her up the air thick with dust and the kind of cold that hadn't moved in years. Light streamed through a small window, casting faint beams over plastic bins and cardboard boxes stacked like silent witnesses. "I didn't know if I'd ever give them back," she said, kneeling beside a blue crate labeled EH, private. "But something told me you'd come looking one day." I crouched beside her, my breath clouding faintly in the chill. "Why didn't you just let me burn them?" "Because you were 17, she said softly. "And grief looks like fire when you don't know what else to do with it." She pushed the bin toward me, then stood and left without another word, the ladder stairs groaning behind her. I sat in silence for a long minute, just staring at the container. My name in thick black Sharpie looked like it had been written yesterday. I peeled off the lid slowly, like lifting the cover on something sacred or toxic. Inside, old school reports, birthday cards, scribbled poems, and at the bottom, a thick envelope stamped "Social Services, Confidential." I pulled it out and opened it with shaking hands. The first page was a financial aid application. Mother of Ethan Hart, it read. Filed May 2009, British Columbia Department of Social Services. I blinked. 2009. That was 2 years after she left me. 2 years after I'd stopped writing letters. My stomach turned as I read the breakdown. Rebecca Hart, claiming to be the sole guardian of 2 dependents, Ethan and Lily. She'd applied for supplemental family support, citing hardship, listing our names as the reason. The form was signed, approved. $400 per quarter. For each child. I flipped to the next page. A confirmation of disbursement. Same name, same lie. Payments had gone out like clockwork. I followed the trail. 2010, 2011, 2012. She'd been receiving money on my behalf while I lived in another country under someone else's roof. I texted Julia, found something. A lot more than I expected. Her reply came fast. You okay? I didn't answer right away. Because no, I wasn't. But I felt focused. Clear. She had monetized me. Not just emotionally, but literally. She'd written me off and then turned me into a number on a tax form. A dependent that didn't depend. A ghost that paid her bills. I pulled out a manila folder from the same bin labeled Supplemental Forms. A dozen pages inside, some tax-related, others medical. Then one that made my breath catch. 2011 Dependent Verification Form. It stated plainly Ethan Hart resides full-time with his mother in Burnaby, BC. I stared at the sentence, my jaw tightening. It was a lie. I had never set foot in Burnaby. In 2011, I was working weekends at a hardware store in Oregon, trying to save for community college, still writing poetry in the margins of my textbooks. She hadn't just forgotten me. She'd erased me, then rewritten me into her story as leverage, as income. My hands clenched the page until the corners crumpled. A creak sounded from below. Aunt May again, calling softly, I'm making tea. I didn't respond. The attic seemed quieter than before, like the walls were holding their breath. I snapped a photo of the verification form with my phone, then another of the original 2009 application. Then I reached deeper into the bin, searching for anything else, correspondence notes, records. There was more. A copy of a pediatric appointment card with my name, a fake address listed, an emergency contact, Rebecca Hart. I wasn't just a checkmark on her form. I was part of an elaborate fiction, and now I had proof. But even as I documented everything I knew, this was only the beginning. This was her first mistake, the paper trail she didn't think anyone would ever trace. The rest of the mess, it would come unraveled soon enough. In the back of the folder, almost missed between 2 curling receipts, was another document, folded, worn, and clipped with a rusty paperclip. I unfolded it. Supplemental Statement of Care dated July 2011. A full paragraph typed neatly. Ethan has adjusted well to life in Canada. He is thriving in our community, and I am grateful to be able to provide both my children a safe and loving home. Below it, her signature. And my name, once again a lie. In that moment, I realized I was done waiting for her to trip over herself. It was time to lay the ground for the truth. Line by line. In the corner of the document bin behind the tax forms and medical records was a folded letter with the same handwriting I remembered from the birthday cards. She'd tried to control the narrative, but now I held the original script. I didn't need to scream. I just needed her to know I remembered everything. The cursor blinked at the end of the sentence. Subject for your records body, in case you forgot. Attachment BC, aid form, Ethan Hart. 2009, PDF. My finger hovered over the mouse as the document stared back at me like a ghost. Julia stood behind my chair, barefoot, arms crossed, watching the screen without a word. This is it, she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded. You're starting then. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. There were no drums, no cinematic flair of reckoning, just the small, dry click of a mouse. A quiet sound, yet loud enough to start an avalanche. I hit send. The email went to Rebecca's inbox, the same one she'd used to contact Julia to spin stories to dig her way back in. I CC'd James Elroy, a friend from college who now worked in legal compliance. We hadn't spoken in months, but I knew the name alone would raise a question in Rebecca's mind. Is he going to sue me? I didn't add a single explanation. No context. Let her sweat. Let her wonder how deep I planned to go. I stood up and walked to the window. It was mid-afternoon, the city outside thick with traffic and late autumn fog. People hurrying past in coats and scarves, clutching coffee cups, earbuds in their lives, moving forward while mine had just pivoted hard back toward a war I never chose. The phone rang. Private number. I let it buzz once, twice, 3 times before declining. Then again. And again. On the 4th call, I answered. "Ethan!" she blurted out. Her voice cracked thin and breathless, the edges frayed by panic. "What are you doing? Why would you send that? That was... God, that was a lifetime ago." I stayed silent. Just listened. You don't understand, things were hard, I was broke. I was raising Lily alone. I did what I had to do. They don't make it easy for single mothers, you know. I exhaled once, slow. You weren't a mother. You were a thief. Silence. Then softer, I was surviving. That's all I knew how to do. I didn't mean for you to get hurt. You took money for a son you abandoned, I said. Quarter after quarter, year after year. You think this makes you better than me? She snapped. You think this fixes anything? You think I haven't suffered too? I ended the call. Not out of anger, out of finality. I stared at the phone in my hand for a long while, like it was still glowing from her touch. Behind me, Julia walked over and placed a hand on my back. Her warmth settled between my shoulder blades. "She's scrambling now," she said. I nodded once. She should be. The laptop pinged. I turned back toward the desk. From Rebecca Hart, subject, "Please don't attachment, Lily 2018 JPG, body. She doesn't know. Please don't hurt her." I clicked the image. It was Lily. 15, maybe 16. Standing beside a cake shaped like a violin. "To my brilliant girl," written in swirling blue frosting. Her smile was hesitant, one hand raised in a shy wave. Her hair tied back. Same eyes as mine. The same slope to the jaw. And yet, a stranger. A photo. A plea. Not for me, but for silence. I stared at it for minutes. Not because I didn't care, but because I needed to remind myself what this was. A move. A tactic. An emotional ambush dressed in frosting and innocence. Julia leaned closer, saw the image, said nothing. "I don't want to hurt her," I murmured. "I know." I closed the laptop, sat there with the weight of 1,000 unspoken things pressing into my chest. She wanted to turn this into guilt, into hesitation. But it wouldn't work. Not this time. I had made my first move. A shallow cut, just enough to let her feel the sting. Just enough to make her bleed truth from a place she thought was safe. But now the game had changed. The turkey was dry. But the story she told was soaked in tears and half-truths. I stood at the far end of the church lawn, coat zipped up to my throat, the cold seeping into my fingers. Inside, warm lights flickered through frosted windows, and the muffled sound of clinking silverware and conversation filtered out into the night. Through the open side door, I could see the buffet tables, nearly cleared, paper napkins crumpled beside half-eaten pie slices. The community room was packed. People I hadn't seen in a decade. Old neighbors, some relatives. Even Mrs. Brenda, who lived 3 doors down from Aunt May, had found a seat near the piano. And at the center of it all stood Rebecca, dressed in a soft gray cardigan, her hair pinned back, with just the right amount of effort to look effortless. A woman who knew how to curate a story and a room. She held a paper cup of cider in one hand, the other gesturing delicately as she spoke. "I was a young mother," she said, her voice tremulous enough to sound unrehearsed. I did what I could. I didn't want to choose between my children, but the truth is, Lily was the weaker one. Ethan, he was always strong. Aunt Denise, sitting beside Brenda, nodded solemnly. You did what you thought was best. Rebecca dabbed at her eye with a tissue conveniently pulled from the sleeve of her sweater. I leaned closer to the doorway, my phone already recording. Her voice came through clearly, each sentence a careful mixture of confession and justification. I sent letters. I tried calling, she said. But by the time I got stable enough to reach back Ethan, he'd already moved on. He had a new life, and I didn't want to disrupt it. Whispers moved through the crowd like low wind. But then, Mrs. Brenda tilted her head and spoke just loudly enough. Didn't you tell me back in 2011 that Ethan had dropped out, that he didn't want anything to do with school? Or with you? A flicker barely visible passed across Rebecca's face. I might have said something like that in anger, she replied quickly. But that was never the full story. That's when Harold, an old friend of Dad's, stood up near the snack table. Back then you said he was trouble. You said you had to protect Lily from him. The room quieted. Even the kids in the corner scraping whipped cream off their plates paused. Rebecca's face held, but her knuckles whitened around the paper cup. She forced a smile. Grief makes us say things. But that doesn't mean they're true. I want to reconnect. I'm here now because I believe family can heal. We can move forward. There it was. The clean pivot. From villain to martyr. From truth to tearful revision. I leaned against the wall, letting the cold bricks soak into my spine. My phone was still recording. Every word, every inconsistency, every tremor in her voice. My name hadn't been spoken with sincerity once, only as a prop, a backstory, an accessory to her redemption arc. A few minutes later, the crowd began to disperse. Hugs exchanged. Foil wrapped over leftovers. The kind of post-event comfort that leaves no room for fact-checking. Inside, Rebecca gathered her things, still smiling, still shaking hands. Then her gaze drifted out the window beside the punch table. Our eyes met. She didn't smile. Neither did I. She didn't wave. I didn't move. Just silence across glass and 20 feet of dying grass. And in that stillness, she knew her performance was no longer private. She tried to play the victim. But victims don't write checks in someone else's name. It was a gray morning, the kind that presses on your chest like unfinished business. Julia sat at the kitchen table, a single envelope in her hand. No return address. But we didn't need one. I recognized the curve of the handwriting. Perfect cursive like always. Rebecca Hart's signature move elegance as a weapon. Inside was a demand letter. On soft cream-colored legal stock. The kind you send when you're not just angry but performatively indignant. My name at the top. Full. No son, no Ethan, as she used to say. Just Mr. Ethan Hart. She was suing me. The letter accused me of defamation with malicious intent, emotional distress inflicted upon a minor Lily Hart, and unauthorized distribution of private family records. It demanded an immediate cease and desist and apology, and the removal of all online material. She also requested mediation within 10 business days, or she'd proceed with formal litigation. Julia looked up at me, her lips tight. She CC'd your employer. I stared at the paper, not surprised. But something inside me nodded anyway. And this? Julia whispered, sliding her phone across the table. Photos? Old ones? From college? Me at a party? One with Erin, my ex, leaning against me with a red cup in her hand. Another where I was shirtless laughing in a lake. Grainy but clear enough. The kind that could be used out of context. The kind that screamed unstable man with a wild past. They're on a local Facebook group, Julia added. Posted from a burner account, 3 mutual friends confirmed. Same caption under all of them. Is this the kind of man who harasses a mother and child? My pulse didn't spike. I didn't break the glass in my hand. I just stood there. She's using Lily. I said flatly. Weaponizing her. Julia nodded. And banking on the fact that you won't strike back. I didn't answer. I walked into the study, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. I pulled out the scanned copy of the 2009 financial aid form, the one that read, "Mother of Ethan Hart, while I lived 2 states away." Then I opened the 2011 update, the one where she claimed I lived in Canada. I added the social services deposit log, her handwriting, her signature, her lie. Next, I took a photo of one of the burned letters Aunt May had kept. It was charred at the edges but still legible. I had written, "I miss you. I got a B+ in math. Julia says hi." Then I wrote the post. I was 12 when she left. I wrote every year. I never got a reply. Meanwhile, she cashed checks with my name on them, called me unstable, called me dangerous. Now she wants silence. I attached the documents and hit publish. I didn't add hashtags. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't ask for pity. I let the words and the evidence do what they needed to do. Within the hour, there were 50 shares. By noon, one of her old coworkers commented, "I remember her saying Ethan chose to stay behind." Guess that wasn't true. I muted my phone. An hour later, it vibrated again. Just once. A message. Not from a friend. Not from Julia. Not from anyone I'd ever expected to hear from. Just a name, Lily Hart. 3 words. Is this true? I stared at the screen. 16 years of silence. And now a single question that carried the weight of everything she thought she knew. I didn't need revenge. I needed silence and legal distance. The courthouse was quieter than I expected. For a building that decided so many lives, it felt almost too calm, like everything here moved in slow, deliberate motion. The kind of place where no one yelled, where no one slammed doors and vanished. Julia walked beside me, clutching the folder close to her chest. Inside, documents we had gathered for weeks. Financial forms, the letter from social services, printed screenshots of Rebecca's smear campaign, a copy of the burn-scarred letter from Aunt May's attic. The past alphabetized and stapled. Room 304 smelled like cold coffee and dust. A clerk with wire-rimmed glasses nodded as we stepped in. He barely looked up when he handed us the form. Petition for civil restraining order, it read across the top. My full name was typed beneath. And hers. Rebecca Hart. I filled out each field with careful hands. Every check mark was a statement. She contacted my employer. She sent messages to my spouse. She disseminated misleading content in a public forum. She knowingly fabricated claims. She manipulated family members for personal and financial gain. Julia's hand brushed mine as I reached the last section. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "Once you sign this, there's no going back. You won't be able to pretend it's just drama. She'll know this is war." I looked up at her. My wife, solid, strong. She'd watched me bury every unanswered birthday, every burned letter, every almost hope that maybe Rebecca would say sorry. Now all of it sat on the table. "I never had a way back," I said. "She slammed that door when I was 12. I've just been staring at it ever since." The clerk took our folder. He leafed through the evidence, nodded, and stamped the front page. "Temporary restraining order will be reviewed in 48 hours. If approved, it will be effective for 30 days pending hearing." I exhaled. Not relief. Not victory. Just a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding since October. Since that first voicemail. Since the old wound started bleeding again. Outside, the sky was a muted steel gray. We walked to the car in silence, the world a little quieter than before. As Julia drove, I stared out the window. The courthouse faded behind us, swallowed by downtown traffic. A street vendor sold kettle corn at the corner. A kid walked by in a backpack too big for his shoulders. Life kept moving. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a work email. Or maybe something from Aunt May. But it wasn't either. Just a single message. "I need to talk. Just you and me." Lily. I stared at it for a long time. The last time I saw her, she was 6, holding a doll, crying as she was buckled into a car that drove away without me. Now she was what 20, a stranger with my blood. A stranger who had seen the post. A stranger who was finally asking for the truth. Alone. I didn't know what she wanted to say, but I knew I had to listen. She wore white. I wore silence. The courtroom wasn't packed, but it might as well have been. The ceiling lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting that dry, clinical glow over everything: papers, eyes, histories. Rebecca sat 2 benches across, clad in white. A deliberate choice. The kind of white meant to scream innocence in a room trained to doubt. Her lipstick was pale pink. Her hands trembled just enough to seem believable. And beside her, her new lawyer, slick suit, a hint of practiced empathy, flipped through folders like a magician preparing a reveal. I didn't look at her. I hadn't for most of the morning. Case 2023-178. Petition for restraining order. Hart v. Hart. The clerk's voice sliced through the low murmurs. The Judge Harris was already seated. She didn't smile. 60-something, steel-gray hair in a tight bun. Her reputation in this district was simple. No patience for melodrama. Rebecca's lawyer rose first. He stood with the confidence of someone who thought optics still worked. Your Honor, he began, my client comes to this courtroom not in anger but in grief. Grief over years lost and a relationship she desperately wants to mend. I heard the words, but they didn't land. Julia, sitting 2 rows behind me, shifted slightly. I could feel her presence like a tether around my spine. This entire matter stems from miscommunication, misunderstandings, the lawyer said, and a mother's instinct to reconnect with a son she never stopped loving. Rebecca pressed a tissue to her cheek, eyes glossy. She looked briefly toward the public seats. There were no cameras, but she still performed. My client has made efforts, peaceful, private, to reach out. What she received in return was public humiliation, online posts, legal threats, emotional damage. My attorney, Lisa Grant, stood without flourish. Her voice didn't rise. She didn't need it to. Your Honor, attached to our filing are scans of government assistance applications submitted by Ms. Hart between 2009 and 2011. These documents list Ethan Hart, then a minor, as residing in her household in British Columbia. They are false. She handed the documents to the clerk. Judge Harris skimmed. Mr. Hart was not living with his mother at that time. No, Your Honor. He was residing full-time with his legal guardian, May Tucker, in Oregon. We have school records, medical records, and testimony to that effect. Harris glanced at Rebecca. Ms. Hart, are you aware that claiming benefits under false pretenses constitutes federal fraud? Rebecca opened her mouth, closed it. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering. She finally said, I didn't realize. I thought he used to. She trailed off. There it was. The breath of the courtroom changed. The kind of shift you can feel more than hear. A neighbor's frown. A shuffled foot. One truth too heavy to excuse. I'm issuing a temporary restraining order effective immediately, the judge declared, pen already moving. Duration 60 days. Mr. Hart may petition for extension if necessary. This case will remain open pending additional review. The gavel struck once. Not loud, but final. As I gathered my papers, Rebecca stepped closer. Just enough to break the rule already. Konjang kofa hui joy mesao, she whispered. I looked her straight in the eye. I'm protecting mine. She flinched. Outside, the air hit different. Not warm, but freer. I turned my phone back on. A new message lit up the screen. I need to talk. Just you and me, Lily. She forgot to hang up. That's how I finally heard the truth. I was brushing my teeth when the phone buzzed. Just past 9 p.m., the same day the courtroom swallowed my words and gave me silence in return. Julia was folding laundry on the bed. Calm. Still. as if we hadn't just stood in front of someone who declared our lives off limits to a woman I once called Mom. I reached for the phone. One voicemail. Unknown number. No name, no ID, but I didn't need a name anymore to know who it was. Again, Julia asked softly. I nodded. Probably just noise. I tapped play and walked toward the window. What I heard made me stop cold. A click. A breath. Then her voice. He'll think I didn't mean it. That's the key. Let him feel like he won. There was no greeting. No setup. Just her voice spilling out raw and unfiltered. He's always been soft. Rebecca said, not realizing the line was still recording. Even back then. I didn't need to scream. He folded on his own. May coddled him to death. Silence. Then the sound of a chair creaking. Another voice, lower, male, her attorney. You're pushing this too close, Rebecca. The documents, if anyone digs deeper. Oh, please, she snapped. I'll say it was a clerical mistake. Some government intern typed the wrong name. They won't audit something from 2011. And if they do, I cried in court, didn't I? She scoffed. All I need now is Lily. That's the real card. Get her to say she's scared. They always believe the youngest. My grip tightened around the phone. The toothbrush in my hand shook. Julia turned from the bed, catching my expression. What is it? I handed the phone over. She hit play again. Her face stiffened by the second. Rebecca continued laughing. If Lily plays her part, we'll guilt him into settling. Then clean slate. And if not, we burn him. Old photos that X whatever. Men like him always have something buried. Another pause. The lawyer's voice again, wary, Rebecca. I built this story. I can bury him with it. Don't forget that. The recording ended. Silence fell like ash. Julia sat down slowly, as if afraid the floor might vanish. She didn't know it was still recording, I said. Julia blinked. You're going to use that, right? I didn't answer right away. I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and created a new folder. I named it Closure. Dragged the voicemail file in. No edits, no cuts. Then I backed it up. Twice. I won't leak it yet, I said. But when I need it, I didn't have to finish. Julia understood. Outside, the streetlights flickered against the dark. Somewhere a dog barked. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was preparing. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a number I didn't know. Lily, I want to meet. Alone. She had built her whole life on stories. Now she was choking on them. The blog post went live at 9:07 a.m. on a Tuesday. No hashtags, no comment section, no call for sympathy, just a link to the recording, raw, untouched, and a single paragraph of context. This was my mother. I don't want revenge. I want the truth to breathe on its own. I didn't share it on social media, didn't DM it to journalists. I simply published and waited. By noon, it had been reposted in 3 parenting forums, a local church newsletter thread, and 2 closed Facebook groups I didn't even know existed. Someone had taken screenshots. A Twitter thread summarized the story with chilling bullet points. Abandoned her son at 12. Lied on government forms. Manipulated daughter for sympathy. Caught on tape bragging about all of it. By 3 p.m. the phone rang. Not mine, Rebecca's, I imagine, or maybe the church's. All I knew was that Pastor Dale called Aunt May. He sounded shaken, Aunt May told me that evening. Said he couldn't, in good conscience, allow Rebecca to remain on the board. Not after this. Did he ask about me? I asked. She shook her head. No, just said, I didn't know. Over and over again. Lily didn't text right away. But that night I received a forwarded email from Julia's account. It was a screenshot of Lily's last message to her mother. Lily, you used me, and I let you. But never again. I stared at it for a long time. There were no follow-ups, no typing bubble, just silence. 3 hours later, my doorbell rang. Julia and I were watching reruns something light forgettable. She muted the TV. I stood, walked to the door but didn't open it right away. I looked through the peephole. She was there. Rebecca. Kneeling. Hair loose. Jacket half-zipped. Hands clasped like she was trying to hold herself together. I didn't move. Neither did she. The porch light caught the edges of her face, highlighting the parts makeup used to hide. Puffy eyes, cracked lips. Years she thought she could outsmart. I didn't open the door. Instead, I turned around. Julia met my eyes. "Do you feel satisfied?" she asked. I thought about it. The recordings, the courtroom, Lily's message, the church. I shook my head. No, just lighter. Outside, the knocking stopped. She didn't say sorry, but her silence said enough. The mailbox was colder than I expected. It bit into my fingers as I pulled the metal handle, expecting nothing more than a holiday coupon or a bill slipped in late. Instead, there was an envelope. Handwritten. No stamp. Just my name, Ethan. I stood there for a moment, letting the wind bite through my jacket before walking back inside. Julia looked up from the kitchen. Anything? I held up the envelope. No return address, I said, but I already knew. I sat at the dining table, slid my finger under the flap, and unfolded the single sheet. Her handwriting was neat. Small. A little shaky near the start, as if she'd restarted once or twice. Ethan. I didn't think you'd ever hear from me again. Honestly, I thought that was the point. But then I started replaying things. Mom's stories. Her versions of our family. And the cracks started showing. I used to believe her. Every word. That you were cold. That you didn't care. That you abandoned us. Then one night last month, she made me practice what to say to a judge. She told me to cry. She told me to call you a stranger. And when I said, "He's not a stranger," she slapped the table and said, "He is if I say he is." That was the moment. That's when everything started to fall apart for me. I still don't know who I am without her voice in my head, but I know what I'm not. I'm not her puppet. I don't expect anything from you. Not forgiveness, not family. I just wanted you to know I believe you now. And I'm sorry it took me this long to even question her. You don't need to reply. I just needed to say it. Lily, I read it twice, then a third time. Julia didn't speak. She sat on the armrest beside me, her hand brushing my shoulder once. She wrote all that she asked. I nodded. Doesn't ask for anything. Nope. She just told the truth. Yeah. Julia leaned her head against mine. That baby girl in the Halloween photos. She really is your sister. I stared at the letter, at the parts where the pen pressed harder, where her resolve had to fight through hesitation. I walked to my desk, pulled out a small card. Not fancy. Just blank inside. Wrote a single line. I'm not your brother anymore, but I won't be your enemy. I sealed it. No flourish. No name on the front. Just initials EEH. I left it in the mailbox that night, knowing she'd be back. Somehow. Hours later, as we were settling into bed, my phone buzzed. A message from Lily. Thank you. That's something I never heard from Mom. I didn't reply, but I slept better that night than I had in weeks. I stood in front of the house I once called home. The door was open this time. The cold was sharper on January 1st. Not the kind of cold that stings, it was gentler than that. The kind that makes you breathe slower. That reminds you you're still here. Julia and I had just left Aunt May's. We stayed longer than we meant to. The kitchen still smelled like nutmeg and toast, and her laugh echoed long after we stepped out. Before we left, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "You did what I couldn't. You faced it. On your terms." I didn't say anything, but the weight in my chest shifted. Not vanished. Just moved. We drove in silence until Julia glanced at me. Do you want to? I didn't answer right away, but I turned the wheel without speaking. Toward the old street. It hadn't changed much. The same cracked sidewalk, the same birch tree half leaning toward the neighbor's yard. The house had new paint, soft green with white trim. The porch light was brighter. There was a sign above the door now. Birch and Butter Local Bakery. I laughed softly. Of course it's a bakery. Julia smiled. Want to go in? We walked up together. The door was already open. A little bell rang as we stepped inside. A woman in her 30s, flower on her apron, hair in a loose bun, looked up. Morning, Happy New Year. Happy New Year, I said. She tilted her head. You look familiar. I smiled. I used to live here. A long time ago. She lit up. Oh, you must be Ethan. Are you Aunt May's nephew? I blinked. You know May. She stops by every Thursday for lemon bars. Told me a little about you. I nodded, unsure what else to say. She motioned to a table by the window. Sit. Let me get you both some tea. On the house. Julia and I sat. The sunlight poured in through the same window I used to stare out of as a boy. The baker returned with 2 mugs and a plate of shortbread. Then, hesitating, she reached into a drawer and pulled out a small photo in a clear sleeve. Found this while renovating the attic, she said. Thought you might want it. It was me. 12 years old. In a Halloween costume, something homemade with a crooked grin, and eyes that didn't quite know how to smile. I stared at it for a long moment. Thanks, I said, and meant it. After a while, I stood. Walked to the back of the shop. To the old bedroom. It wasn't mine anymore, of course. The walls had been repainted, the floorboards polished, but the window was still there. I didn't step inside. I just looked. One long look. Then I turned, walked out, and let the door close softly behind me. That night back home, I opened my laptop. There was a blank screen waiting. I created a new folder. Letters I'll keep. And for the first time in years, I started to write. Not to beg, not to prove anything, just to remember, and to let go. I didn't raise my voice. I just revealed the truth and watched the silence that followed do what shouting never could. The justice I needed didn't come quickly, but when it arrived, it cut deeper than any lie ever told. Because when injustice is met with quiet, relentless truth, even the strongest illusion will crumble. Perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. If this story resonated with you, like, share, and comment below. Type 1 if you felt seen, or 2 if you'd change how it ended.